when Stephon Mack was charged with his brother's murder. Wallace Peoples had one message for Lil Durk.
I had to leave. I had to let that go. When I let that go, I started to grow.
It seems Lil Durk didn't let go because a recently released video shows him killing Mack as if it were no big deal. This widely shared video has the potential to completely alter Lil Durk's case and, for the first time, raise the possibility of the death penalty. Let's dissect everything. Lil Durk's latest video goes viral. A recently released security film purports to capture Lil Durk at the scene of Stephon Mack's murder. In the video, many people think that Lil Durk hired the masked gunman that attacked Mack. People on the internet and in the streets have been conjecturing that Lil Durk killed Stephon Mack in retaliation ever since the video was released. The hypothesis was that Stephon was involved in the killing of Durk's brother. Dang, a death that deeply affected the Chicago rapper. Following D-Thang's passing, Durk became quiet for a spell until resurfacing later with more intense gestures and music, as fans have noted. Now that this fresh video shows what looks to be Durk at the scene, people claim that this was personal and not random. Some say it was a premeditated strike, retaliation for the bloodshed, while others believe it's just another internet-driven conspiracy. Let's now discuss the specifics. As they say, the internet is here to stay. When we examine how investigators allegedly used Durk's digital trail to support their case against him, things will start to change. This is at the CSI level, detective work, but instead of DNA evidence, we're talking about phone records, Instagram stories, and text messages that provide what the federal government says is unquestionably incriminating information. You see, if you wanted to catch someone slipping in the past, you needed tangible proof, witnesses, and, if you were lucky, a wiretap. But these days, dude, these phones are essentially spy gadgets that people always carry about, recording everything they do. A text message was the first piece of evidence to reach the federal level. Message that may appear innocent at first glance, but when taken into consideration, it conveys a completely different meaning. Anthony Montgomery Wilson, one of the guys who was indicted for actually shooting Stephon Mack, received a message on his phone that said, "Did that Durk give you that money?" suggesting some kind of financial involvement on Lil Durk's part. Investigators quickly become suspicious when they discover a text on his phone inquiring if Lil Durk gave him money. On the streets, usually it's not a real commercial deal when someone asks for money immediately after a hit. If you understand, that has to do with payment for services given. But hold on, things get even stranger. Court documents, social media posts, including one implying Durk handed someone money, and phone call information. Observe how the same evidence consistently appears on many devices and platforms. Investigators refer to something as a pattern, and federal cases are constructed based on patterns. There appears to have been a level of organization far above any impromptu street beat, as evidenced by the fact that several persons were reportedly debating whether Durk had paid money in connection with this murder. Prosecutors need to demonstrate a murder for a higher conspiracy. And this appears to be a well-planned operation with obvious financial agreements. However, this is where the story takes a crazy turn that is impossible to fake. The most damning evidence did not originate from a confidential source or a covert wiretap. It was uploaded for public viewing directly from Durk's personal Instagram account. Lil Durk shared an Instagram story following Mack's murder that included a foreword to that song, Aha, and a cutout that was thought to be a reference to his song Aha, and perhaps a celebration of the murder. Yo, take a moment to process it. Investigators claim that Durk was essentially boasting about Stephon Mack's shooting death on Instagram just hours after it happened outside a youth facility. With the mention of Aha, there were many questions raised by that. This is when the exciting part begins. If you feel some type of way, you better slide and get revenge. He says therapy isn't helping. He's been killing for a cleanse. These lyrics, which are part of the song Aha, which was released on February 22, 2022, may seem like standard drill rap fare, but investigators cited the timing and content as circumstantial evidence. Consider it in January, Matt is slain. The song, which has lyrics about falling for vengeance and killing for purification, is released in February following Durk's blogs about Aha shortly after. This timeline is more than simply artistic expression. If you're a federal prosecutor, that might be proof of murderous celebration and premeditation. This is the kind of thing that keeps defense lawyers up at night. When your customer is essentially recording their own alleged offenses on social media, which greatly facilitates the prosecution's task. Furthermore, this case may establish some significant precedents in a time when drill rappers are continuously criticized for their lyrics. However, text messages and social media posts are only a portion of the issue. The government's case also seems to rely heavily on traditional street intelligence. Those inside say they know exactly what happened. According to confidential sources, Lil Durk promised cash in exchange for murders, according to court records. Although using informants is common practice in organized crime cases, it can be challenging because you are working with people who typically have their own legal issues and motivations for cooperating. When combined with other pieces of evidence, informant testimony has the potential to be extremely potent. However, if someone is only telling the authorities what they want to hear in order to get out of their own bind, it might also be wholly untrustworthy. The defense is going to keep hammering that home. The way the alleged illicit behavior was purportedly combined with lawful economic operations is what makes this case so complicated. Prosecutors claim that F operated as a group of people who committed acts of violence, such as murder and assault, under the orders of defendant banks in order to preserve their standing. It wasn't merely a record label that happened to have some street guys on the roster, if this accusation is accurate. Allegedly, the music industry was being used as a front for coordinated violence by a whole criminal organization. Right there, that is some next-level gang. When you consider the ramifications, they are astounding. The way the entire business functions might alter if federal prosecutors can demonstrate that a prosperous record label was in fact a criminal organization. Every street-oriented musical label, rap group, and musician who discusses actual street life in their songs may encounter this kind of examination. This is where it becomes even more profound, though. The Stephon Mack case is not the only aspect of this. Citing a pattern of suspected murder for hire plans, prosecutors have utilized the accusations in the Mack case to argue against Lil Durk's pretrial release in the Quando Rondo case. The federal government is essentially stating that this was not an isolated incident. They claim that Durk was in charge of an entire operation that involved settling scores and methodically removing alleged threats, making use of his music, empires, resources, and reach. We're talking about record-level accusations that could lock Lil Durk up for life if they can demonstrate that pattern. According to the government's theory, Durk was leading two separate lives, using his legitimate success to fund and facilitate street justice on a scale that most local dealers could never dream of. He is a crime leader by night and a superstar rapper by day. The thing that has everyone perplexed, though, is this. As of the time of this video, Lil Durk has not been charged in relation to the murder of Stephon Mack. Despite all of this purported evidence, his legal team is utilizing it as a defense in his other case since they are so certain they won't charge him. His team's confidence was evident when they raised their bond offer to $5 million, citing the Mack case's lack of charges as justification. That's a daring move that implies the defense is either wagering heavily on the notion that the strength of the evidence isn't what it seems. The case's strength is seriously called into doubt given that Lil Durk is still uncharged despite to people Anthony Montgomery Wilson and Preston Powell being indicted for the murder in 2023. Perhaps the evidence that appears so incriminating on paper is not up to legal scrutiny. Perhaps the social media posts and texts aren't as definitive as they seem. Or perhaps the feds are simply holding off on filing charges that will stick until the ideal time. There has been division in online communities regarding the entire circumstance. Some people think the federal government doesn't have a solid paper trail, which means that even while the evidence may seem convincing in news reports, it might not be up to the high standards needed for federal prosecution. Furthermore, the video barely showed Lil Durk's face. Despite the fact that Stephon Mack seemed to be suspecting an attack that day, interview.
Cause you see, he even got that walk like, man, I dared man, I sparked this whole lot up, nigga. Right? You could tell, he even looking over like, man, I dared.
Social media has been flooded with posts speculating that federal authorities may not have sufficient evidence to link Lil Durk to Stephon Mack's death in Chicago. This suggests that the case may not be as strong as initially believed. To understand why there is so much speculation, we must understand where it all started. We were given the chance to go back to the trenches, return to where Lil Durk was, learn that one either succeeds or fails in his universe. Come on, let's dig. Lil Durk's violent past. Lil Durk is the voice of the streets and the king of Chicago drill. The guy who ate government cheese and was nominated for a Grammy. On the other hand, some believe that behind all of those glittering trophies and sold-out performances, something evil is happening. A real street justice type that can change how we think about this man. You see? Durk didn't grow up in a suburban paradise. This man was raised in Englewood, one of Chicago's worst neighborhoods. And that's saying something in a city that has a bad reputation for gun violence. This was not just a bad neighborhood. These were 24/7 South in full survival mode. Now check this out. In most areas, kids are solely interested in homework and computer games. In Englewood, however, the situation is very different. That's the kind of setting where real ones are bred. But it also fosters the kind of commitment and street customs that can stick with you long after you move out of the area. Furthermore, Durk claims that his father began playing the game before he was even able to walk.
I caught $8 million in a lot, like 6 bricks, like $8 million, 6 bricks.
Take a moment to process that. This is an example of genuine street loyalty. Lil Durk was carrying a lot of responsibility from his father, Dante Banks. And when the FBI showed up, he chose to remain silent and accept a life sentence rather than spy on his man, Larry Hoover. Yes, there is a traditional gangster. It also set the tone for all the developments that followed. The no-snitching code was more than just a catchphrase in the Banks premises. It was literally a family tradition, and Durk's father lost his freedom as a result. And after Daddy was put in jail, the whole family moved from living in luxury to having financial difficulties. Imagine having everything, man, and then having a 3-bedroom apartment with 10 people living in it. That kind of fall from grace will rapidly humble you, but it will also make you hungry in ways that suburban kids will never understand. This is where the real Durk was fashioned. Not in a studio booth, but in a house where food was not guaranteed, and survival necessitated early street knowledge.
What 300 OTF stand for?
I'm saying OTF stand for Only the Family, man. 300 just part of our movement, man.
For Lil Durk, F represented a whole movement. A brotherhood was established in the trenches of the most dangerous blocks in Chicago. But according to federal prosecutors, it was much more than a label or a bunch of rappers. A superseding indictment claims that it was a criminal organization that, under Lil Durk's direction, committed violent crimes, including murder. The feds are basically saying that even though you all thought they were releasing incredible music, they are also charged with body dropping. Lil Durk's journey from a hungry kid to a popular rapper seemed like the ideal come-up story. He seemed to have broken free from the cycle of violence that had claimed so many lives in his area, started to move in the music game, and discovered his voice. That will change on January 7, 2022, though Stephon Mack, 24, was killed when gunmen exited a car and began firing at him as he was leaving the youth center. A security guard was also hit, but he survived. This wasn't a random drive-by or a botched heist. This was a straight-up execution, according to investigators. Stephon Mack was not only a lucky man who fell in love. This person allegedly oversaw the Smashville gang of the Gangster Disciples, a gang involved in the June 2021 killing of Lil Durk's brother, Dante Banks. The whole story starts at that point, goes really deep pretty fast. You know, blood is the only way to pay off some obligations in the streets. When Dante Banks was killed, a street law compliant response was necessary. According to federal officials, Lil Durk is accused of planning Stephon Mack's murder as retaliation. There was more to this than a simple personal grudge. This was about respecting family members and the unwritten laws that govern neighborhood, life, and death. The same dedication that made Durk's music authentic and relatable is said to have led to his murder. But this case is so strange for more reasons than only the allegation that Durk released a hit. That's how investigators claim to be able to prove it, especially because Durk is alleged to have contributed some of the most damning evidence. While some contend that the federal government is trying to criminalize hip-hop culture in general, others assert that the evidence is unmistakable. Regardless of your position, however, the data that has already emerged is truly remarkable. This goes beyond just street cred. It has to do with the potential for one rapper to be found guilty of murder. What happens when being truthful in your music can become maintaining the truth in the legal system? The same sincerity that made Lil Durk famous eventually destroys everything he produced. Let's look at the possible repercussions of these charges. When street credibility meets federal time, family tension has been rapidly increasing, especially for those who climbed out of the streets to achieve fame in the hip-hop scene. To begin with, Lil Durk's name is not new to courtrooms or media. He has been walking a tightrope between rap fame and the streets for years. In 2019, he was accused of attempted murder in Atlanta in relation to a shooting that took place outside the Varsity. Police had surveillance, shell casings, and social media footage. Durk beat the case, though, when the evidence seemed to become cold. From that vantage point, the image was clear. For Durk, legal or literal heat is nothing new. The storyline takes a darker turn in 2021. His older brother, D-Tong, was shot and killed outside a Chicago bar. Durk didn't say anything in public, but that moment broke him. There were rumors that Stephon Mack, a man most people had never heard of, was somehow connected to that murder. There are still many people who think he killed D-Thang. If it was whether through direct involvement or just association with the opposition, Mack's name remained in whispered whispers among those who knew the score. Stephon Mack was more than simply a name on a spreadsheet. He was reportedly assigned to a set that has a long history of disagreement with Durk's group. A criminal with a history, enemies, and ties that could trap anyone. He was not only a victim. Some people targeted him. Now that this other movie has come to light, fans are drawing links, asking if it was a message, retaliation, or just a coincidence in a setting where disagreement can easily turn deadly. The timeline goes as follows. Durk beats a big case. His brother is shot and dies, and then a famous enemy is found dead. There are a ton of theories on the internet, which is not surprising. Furthermore, whether or not this new footage establishes anything in court, its impact has already been felt in the court of public opinion. Furthermore, it receives made worse by the fact that Lil Durk faces several murder charges. He was also accused of killing Jam's baby mama after he found out that Jam was wearing a wire. In this Lil Durk case, we are dealing with the legal problems of more than one man. Hip-hop in general, and how staying loyal to your roots can actually cost you your freedom are topics covered in this article. Let's keep it at 100. Hip-hop has always praised authenticity. Since its beginning, the culture has placed a strong emphasis on representing one's roots, remaining true to oneself, and never forgetting the streets that help to shape oneself. But what happens if that authenticity is used as evidence in a federal murder case? What happens when telling the truth also means telling the truth in front of a jury? A fundamental divide that has been brewing in hip-hop for decades may be triggered by the Durk case. The same street cred that made his songs relatable, his millions of supporters are supposedly being used by federal prosecutors to paint him as the leader of a criminal enterprise.
That's where it all started at, you know what I'm saying? Just the rap, the whole stop going to school.
That sincerity, that connection to the community, and that reluctance to embellish it to win others' acceptance. It was because of these qualities that Durk became well known. But according to reports, prosecutors are trying to use those same qualities to build a RICO case. The irony is powerful. The cornerstone of Durk's whole professional life was the notion that he distinguished himself from other rappers by refusing to cap about living on the streets. He experienced it firsthand. Since he really came from it, he never tried to break away from it, not even after he became famous and affluent. However, this is when things become really difficult. In a culture where telling the truth is the most money. How do you maintain your credibility without running the risk of getting hurt? The legal implications of this case are extensive and extend well beyond Durk's specific situation. Luckily for him, however, the defense seems confident in their position, and that confidence suggests that there may be more to this story than meets the eye. Unless they have concrete evidence, Lil Durk's legal team's bold statement that he won't face charges is quite bold. Unless you genuinely believe there is insufficient evidence to bring charges against someone, you wouldn't do it. The evidence that seems so incriminating in news reports may not be reliable in court. Analysis: the SMS exchanges and social media posts might not be as conclusive as they appear. Conjecture may be the basis for the entire case. No one is optimistic. Lil Durk has always struck a balance between sharing personal details and narrating stories. He's not just rapping about the trenches. He was a product of them. According to some fans, if you listen carefully, he has been dropping clues for years. After D-Thank's passing, Durk's music took on a darker tone. They started to sound like thin-veiled threats. In tunes such as Still Running, Red Man, and Pissed Me, he raps about betrayal, retribution, and not trusting people around him. For the typical fan, these are just challenging bars. But they sound eerily like the people watching the real timeline unfold: the death of D-Fang, the quiet anxiety in the city, and now the murder of Stephon Mack. Some followers believe Durk was speaking directly to Stephon by omitting his name. Others think he was expressing the kind of grief that leads into retaliation, a pain that the streets all too well understand. And now that the video is out, people are hearing what he said once more and asking themselves, did he tell us all along? Lil Durk was really popular before this video came out. The platinum big features, arena tours, and plaques. Finally, he went from being a Chicago drill rapper to a full-fledged mainstream performer. But all of that progress is now in jeopardy. If the person in the video is identified as Durk, a new criminal investigation could be started. Even if he is not arrested, the public pressure, it has happened to us before. The law will not be far behind once the streets start speaking. The music industry is making money. His label connections, his endorsements, and even his touring powers could make everything rattle, attention as well. Artists may distance themselves, brands may withdraw. Fans, especially those who have lost loved ones to violence, may start to see Durk in a different light. His voice is no longer confined to the trenches. He might be a murderer seeking revenge. Even if Lil Durk gets away with it, the shadow of this case will follow him. Every action will be watched, every line will be analyzed, and every quiet moment will say something important. This video didn't just blow the internet away. It launched a whole new chapter, one that might alter the conclusion of Lil Durk's story because everything has changed. The game was recently altered. The fans are paying more attention, and the street whispers are becoming louder.
LA, they all had lifestyle, and all of a sudden I got to learn of different cities. So now I know, now I want to take it overseas.
If the charges against Lil Durk are true, the path to success might not be as straightforward or as redemptive as it appears on the surface. Perhaps Durk's sincerity and devotion, which fueled his creative success, also bound him to obligations and conflicts that would ultimately threaten everything he had built. Whether charges are eventually filed or not, Durk's reputation has already suffered, and the hip-hop culture as a whole is currently dealing with some challenging issues. Is it truly possible to escape your past? Does success make one immune to street fights? The notion that Instagram whether Durk is charged prevails in the case or is found guilty. The implications of this case will likely go far beyond the fate of a single individual. This is more than just a bad rap feud. It's the use of rap lyrics and posts as evidence in murder cases is shocking the industry and isn't going away anytime soon. In response to more serious accusations that rocked the hip-hop culture as a whole. This involves retribution, revenge, and even serious murder. What do you think of these claims? Please share your thoughts in the space provided for comments, and don't forget to click on the following card on your